thanks, Colin. I think you found every bio that I've ever posted in any way online and put them all together. That was epic. I just want to say, can you hear me okay at the back? Okay, perfect. I just wanted to say my thanks to Tree for setting up this amazing evening and flying me out here from Alberta. I apologize for bringing the weather with me. I'm taking it home tomorrow, though, so there you go. And thanks to all of you for coming out in the cold, and to the Canada Council for helping me get here. I can put it there without rolling it off onto the floor. So I'm a poet and organic farmer, and I'm a bit of a storyteller as well, so I hope you'll bear with me if I tell you a few stories as I go. I'm going to read you some poems from Seldom Seen Road, and like many good things that happen to poets, we pilfer a lot of them, and one of them was the title for the book. And my husband and I were starting our organic farm in 2006, and about that time we decided to take a road trip across Canada, and we were somewhere... Yikes, towards the end of Saskatchewan, moving towards Manitoba, starting to see early parts of the Canadian Shield happening. And there was this fantastic sign by the side of the road that said, Seldom Seen Road. And my poet's brain was ticking because I was trying to write this collection about moving into an existing prairie town and a whole set of histories and stories that I didn't belong to, and really wanting to understand the stories and not knowing how. And so, I drove, 10 minutes down the road, and I made my husband turn the car around so I could go back and get a picture of Seldom Seen Road. He's like, oh, that's perfect. So really the collection starts with the incoming settlers encountering the narratives that were already there on the prairies when they arrived. And then it moves through time to my husband and my own experience moving up to Barhead in the Swan Hills area, into a community where all the young people, all the children of the farmers were going to the city to get educated, and we were the weird teacher hippies who were moving out from the city to start this organic off-grid farm. So the first poem in the book is Inbound. I spent a lot of time in the archives at the Provincial Museum, and I found a fantastic photo, black and white. It's got this family who's obviously just gotten off the train at the end stop Prairie Station. They're in the ox cart, and the women are in these incredible velvet high-collared dresses. And in the back of the ox cart, they have a grandfather clock, and you can see the sterling silver tea service kind of shoved into the back of the wagon. And there they are at the end of the line, and on the back of the photo, all it says is, on the way to the soddy. That whole family is going to spend that winter, in a sod hut. If they're lucky, it's not going to be a dugout in the ground. I'm like, yes, obviously bring the grandfather clock, right? They had no idea what they were facing on the prairies, and that's kind of what my husband and I got into. We had no idea. Inbound. That sterling tea service. 10,000 miles, a pillar clock, and sterling tea service, and here the wagon spreads you like grains of sand or salt. Look back all you want. One cart track ambling, mercurial skyline. Winter ballast, dim shaggy banks of snow, the soddy's blue clay walls frosted through, and you, so much better for a silver service, sans tea. Just sitting there looking at them thinking, you had no clue what was coming down at you. Then I started thinking, so moving on in history a little bit, World War I, World War II, some of these isolated prairie farms, you were really cut off from everyone, especially during the spring mud season. Anyone from Saskatchewan? Yeah, gumbo, right? Right? You hit that gumbo season, you're not going anywhere. And if your car gets out and it gets stuck in that gumbo, it's not going anywhere till the fall when you pull it back out. So I was thinking, well, the only way you could get in touch with some of those farms was the telegrams, right? And the telegrams meant two things. It either meant someone had been born or someone had died, especially around the time of the First World War, Second World War, and what it must have meant to those farms when the telegram came. Telegram. Spring, so they will bring word to you. The farm clamped down in gumbo mud 5 dark miles from the highway, the ditches running deep to flood and nourish the poplar spears. What the war taught you, that there's no good in these missives. How you watched your mother's life unpicked by panic, a fretwork of pattern blown like cobweb. Such possibility lodged in that slim envelope wedged between the stops. It's little wonder your hand quakes upon receipt, tips the teapot cockeyed over stoneware. You blot the spill with a shirt sleeve, feel fear cauterize reason, slit the flap before your nerves desert. Your wife is doing well, coming home when the roads open up, bringing the new baby. From the hill you watch the back 40 gone to muskeg and tamarack, the shifting dance of slough birds. White pelican lifts a pleated wing to steer out over dark water, navigating the skin of things. These still, black places, this accidental light. I think that's one of the things I find myself as a poet and as a farmer spending most time looking at on the prairies is the light, especially this time of year when you're in the middle of an 8-month winter and there's not a heck of a lot else to look at. You're sensitized, right, to every single change of the light, and you can feel it already. Heading towards the end of January here, you can feel the light growing. And there's nothing really except for the stubble fields and the shadows. So how many people have traveled in Alberta? I'm curious. Yeah. How many of you gone down south towards Dinosaur Provincial Park? Ah, excellent. So you may have traveled that highway that goes down via Viking and Killam and Castor. Killam has to have the best town logo ever. It says, "Drive safely, Killam." I kid you not. I kid you not. Only in Alberta. But so there's this great highway that beetles straight down from Edmonton, down the spine of the province, right down towards Dinosaur Provincial Park. And right before you get to Castor, Alberta, there's a fantastic house on the left-hand side of the highway. I highly advise, if you get a chance, knock on the farmer's door near this old farmhouse and get permission to check it out. My husband and I did one summer, and it was amazing. It was one of those old package Eden's homes you could order out of the catalog, and it would arrive flat-packed on the train. But we got his permission, the farmer's permission, to crawl under the barbed wire fence and take photos of this old farmhouse. And it was like time had stopped. You know, the wallpaper was starting to slump down the walls, and the table was still set. And you're just thinking, like, what happened? You know, it was so symptomatic of what was going on across the prairies. Was it foreclosure? Was it death? Was it depression? What was it? But these families just picked up and left. Farmhouse Castor. The early sun skims the plate rail, a kitchen reduced to grit and shambles. The butcher block table, wallpaper slumped about its knees. Light here reveals only absence. Teasel in the bones of the Victory Garden, thrusting barrel staves like iron ribs. What we have come for. Lilacs pressing in these diamond panes, their blossoms stark and fragrant across the hearth. Rainwater shifting in the stair's curved spine. How this land holds everything and nothing back. That's sort of like the prairie. You have those seasons where there's not a whole lot to see, and you have those seasons of mad rush, like the summer. And this next poem I'm going to read you is written for a couple of my students in heading towards the mad rush of summer. Colin mentioned that I teach at Red Deer College, so my school year ends around the beginning of April. And I was talking to a couple of my students, and they're from the small town of Camrose. And I was saying to them, so you guys, what do you have planned on the weekend? And they said, oh, we're going to get, a couple of Mickeys, and we're going to go ride the pump jacks. And I said, the donkey jack pumps, right? And I said, well, I suppose, one, drunk, that would be more fun than sober, and two, it sounds a lot more fun than I have planned on my weekend, marking your papers. But Camrose is not a dying prairie city by any means, but I started thinking about all the students that I teach who come from small towns that are still turning into ghost towns across the prairies, right? And what it means to these kids coming into the big city to get, go to university, go to college, get a job, whatever. And when someone says, where are you from? They don't know how to answer because their town is gone, and what that does to you when the grain elevators come down and when the post office closes and you're from nowhere. So this is for my students. It's called August. Summer is 2 Mickeys and Vancouver weed riding the pump jacks at dawn, and how you can hop a train to the coast if you're daring, high, or maybe a little crazy. This insouciant sun and the nights bigger than we could have dreamed. How the days are bullion, hot and salt, our bodies, the crushed pockets and tall grass behind the scrapyard fence, as if deer had wintered there. The way heat eases and pummels a town when the grain elevators fall, when we are faced with the rubble of their passing. Empty nests under the ridgeline, this and the thin night's leavings. And I know how they feel because I come from a very, very small town in England myself, although you can't tell by my accent. Small country town in England that has 8 houses. So I've even got Camrose beat there, and 3 of them belong to my family. So I know what it means when the small town closes down, although in England it means when the pub closes down, that's when your town is dead. But you know, there seem like there are more and more of us who are giving up life in the city for one reason or another, or going back out to the farms. And I wrote this poem for a good friend of mine who spent 30-odd years as a computer programmer and then decided to give it all up because he had a quarter section out towards Pigeon Lake outside Edmonton there, and he wanted to grow hay. And his wife is like, seriously, you're giving up a 6-figure salary to grow hay. Go for it. But there's something about it, though. If you're a hobby farmer or you're going into that lifestyle or going back to that lifestyle, it's usually because there's something about the land that pulls you back. Less about grain than the slim thighs of land lost to drought, sculpted by hard weather. And how to explain to your wife the rich, dark stir of spring earth. She circumscribed in the domestic, geraniums, crocus corms like knuckle bones. And what you lack, a means to say I would give it all for one night on this land smudged like guilt into palm lines. How the light turns at dusk and in autumn, and how always, out here, I know where I stand. So his move made great sense to me, but then, I'm one of those crazies who's moving back out to the farm. One of the things that I liked most about writing this book was the whole idea of Seldom Seen Road was a chance for me to dig into the stories and the narratives of the prairies that have been forgotten or in danger of being forgotten. And I found some great stories, and it just felt like someone had handed me a poem on a silver platter, and I thought, this story is so wonderful. If I don't make something out of it, more fool me. This is one of those poems. So anyone from Saskatchewan? All one of you. You know I'm going to pick on you, right? Because you said you're... So do you know where Robin Hood, Saskatchewan is? No, I have yet to encounter... I read to a room full of people in Saskatchewan at one point, and they didn't know where Robin Hood was. So no blame. It's a town towards the northeast of the province. It's just about over the borderline there. But technically it's a ghost town. It has been since 1971. In the way of so many small prairie towns, right? The post office closed in 71, and even though there are still a few diehards today, it's considered a ghost town. So there you go, except there's this fantastic story tag to it. So Robin Hood, Saskatchewan, one day, 1991, during the summer, 2 of the town's inhabitants had a grandson. He came back to town and he brought his fiancée, and he said to his grandparents, hey, grandma, and grandpa, I want to marry my girl. I'd like to do it in town, but I really wish the town didn't look like a ghost town. What can you do? Because grandparents can do everything, right? So I'm pretty sure the way it went is grandma got on the party line and called in all the favors she had ever been owed. Because people came from miles around, and they came into town, they all drove in, they cut the grass, they painted the church fence, they hung the bunting, they made ham sandwiches. If you're from a small prairie town, you know that there's always someone making ham sandwiches, right? Somebody dies, ham sandwiches. Somebody's born, ham sandwiches. But they made the ham sandwiches, and they had the wedding ceremony at the church. And then the very next day, the bride and groom went off on their honeymoon. Everyone danced in the community hall, and it was like old times. And then the town just after that fell apart. And it was like it became a ghost town again over the process of about a week. But for that one day in 1991, it was the roaring 20s again in Robin Hood, Saskatchewan. I thought, there's my story. It was so easy. As if one phone call could fend off the ghosts. Coming into town, your pickup shunting like a heifer through the potholes, thinking, you've done it. Bunting lapping at the church eaves, grass slopped and bundled in ubiquitous ham sandwiches that double for weddings and funerals. If collective wishful thinking could back crank the clock, it'd look like this. Church shimmying free of encroaching poplars, sidewalks flush and fences cinching in their spraddled pickets, and the dance floor the way it used to be. Bluegrass and cheek to cheek. It was just one of those stories. It was living in my mind the entire time I was writing this collection. So I put a little note section in the back where I had to tell some of these stories because I thought, otherwise they're going to be lost again, right? Until the next person writes a prairie book and they pop out again. I'm just going to read a couple last poems here. My husband and I run, like I said, an organic farm, and we run a food box program. And so we'd been growing and gathering on the land. And then one year I had a friend of mine up who runs a trap line, and he taught me how to trap. And suddenly my whole relationship to the land changed. And I was going out and I was stalking and I was hunting in a very different way. You know, there was a different kind of patience and watching the animals and seeing how smart they are. You know, if you've ever seen a coyote with a trap, oftentimes they know it's there and they'll circle it and they'll circle it and then they'll hit it, right? And they know something's there, but they're not sure what. And I started thinking how that was a great metaphor for the past, right? Because we know something's there in our past and we circle it in our memories and then it bites us and we think, oh, right? So Trapline starts off with an epigraph from John Newlove. The greatest beauty is to be alive, forgetting nothing, although remembrance hurts like a foolish act, is a foolish act. Nights closing on themselves already. This north country burnishing its bones one against the other. August slinks her limber spine, protests aspen on the turn, the haptic shingling of frost on birch. In the muskeg spruce we scout snare points, memorize the fall of light and timber, plan returns in snow to stretch steel jaws, pound anchor chains. When you taught me about killing, I learned how little keeps us, how to bleed out in the bush and walk through fiercely as though unshaken. Something in us wound with the season, summer's hollowing cheeks, the snap of knuckle bones. Gather me up and cast, winter oracle. And I was sure living that up at my cabin, that winter oracle and the hollowing cheeks and all of that when I was up in my cabin on Sunday night. My car wouldn't start at 9 o'clock at night. And I was thinking, ooh, getting to Ottawa is going to be fun. Always an adventure. I think the last one I'm going to read for you tonight, I think I have time for one more. I come from away. Like so many of us in Canada, we come from away and we're encountering different stories as we get here and settle. My mom was a refugee from Tanzania, from East Africa, and she was sent away when she was 14 years old to England for safety after independence. My dad's a British farm boy. I was born in British farming country. And then my dad in Canada got a job with Native Justice, so I was raised on Native reservations across Western Canada. So the sense of home and a fragmented identity is very much present for me. But the one, I think, who taught me the most about handling the landscape, and particularly handling the winter with grace, was my mom. Because if you think about it, the middle of summer in Tanzania and the middle of winter in Alberta, there's about 100 degrees Celsius temperature difference. And I remember as a kid, about 2 or 3 years old, early 80s, watching my mom in her first winter, and the mercury must have hit minus 55 Celsius with the wind chill. My mom looked like someone had pulled the pin out of a hand grenade and just dropped the grenade in her lap. She was like, what the heck is this? But she taught us a lot about managing landscapes and managing life with grace. So this is for her. It's Alberta, 1983. She's still young enough to remember the bougainvillea on the eaves, old men shuffling in the breezeway, how Indian sweets dye the teeth red and black, those rictus grins. At 3 years old, my scope a different sort of internal. This prairie leaves her hollow, her hands riffling the spice cupboard for turmeric, cardamom, and her sari silks preserved like butterflies. How a cedar trunk can be big enough to hold a world, Dar es Salaam, its blossoms and fragrance, and how a 7-month cold spell limbs the bones. What she taught us, the sparrow's endurance in ice-blind trees, the bone rattle of memory and winter. Thank you.